Hey everyone, welcome back to the Caderna podcast. I'm Brian Caderna. Now, if you've checked out my new book titled, What Should I Do With My Money? You'll notice several of the chapters don't immediately jibe with the conversation of personal finance. One of those is chapter 6, Tech. In today's episode, I sit down with Monica Eaton, the founder of Chargebacks 911, and we see just how quickly tech blends into the everyday flows of every dollar that we have. Monica Eaton is an entrepreneur, author, and thought leader specializing in cyber technology, transactional security, and payment solutions for online businesses, which is just about every business today. She has over 15 years of experience in e-commerce, payments, fraud mitigation, and FinTech. Her company, Chargebacks 911, is the global leader in chargeback prevention and remediation technology. They safeguard more than 2.4 billion transactions per year on behalf of clients in 87 countries around the world. So without further ado, here is Monica Eaton in our conversation on Cryptoscams and your cybersecurity.
Is going to require work and time and sweat and toil.
If money wasn't an issue, what would I be doing?
Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out.
Change is the only constant.
Caderna podcast.
So please tell me, what exactly is a chargeback?
So a chargeback is when a consumer contacts their bank instead of contacting the business owner. And what happens is as soon as they contact their bank, they receive a provisional refund. So they get like an instant gratification, an instant reward, which is one of the reasons why this problem has been growing. And the worst part about this is that it's a guilty before proven innocent type of statistic. So instantly, the business owner is debited for those funds. So for example, let's say I sell $100 worth of merchandise. Well, I make the sale. I receive money for the sale instantly because it was done through a credit card. And then my customer 6 months later, 3 months later, you can file a chargeback almost sometimes up to 365 days later. That customer contacts their credit card company and says they aren't satisfied with the product they received. There's a lot of different reasons that they can give, and their credit card company files something called a chargeback. Well, now I receive a debit for that $100 instantly. I don't have any advance notice. It just is immediately removed from my account. And then it takes up to 90 days for a judgment to be weighed against that case. So essentially, you get this, a chargeback case is sent to the business. The business has to pay the entire amount of the sale. They also have to pay a fee. Sometimes you have a fine. And then you have a responsibility to respond or not respond. If you don't respond, then you lost all that money. If you do respond, it's a very tedious process. And again, it can take 90 days. And then the consumer still has the right to continue to, fight and get their refund. So bottom line
sounds
is
like a
you want
huge
to
pain in
avoid
the
these.
neck.
Yes, it's a huge pain. You don't want them.
Yeah, as you're saying this, I'm like, what a nightmare. Yeah. And so like when I've heard of, as a consumer filing a chargeback or starting that process, it's usually because you see a charge on your credit card statement and you're like, I don't know what that is. I don't remember that. I don't think I ever bought that. So are you saying people, often can just go and say, well, I wasn't really happy with that, so let me immediately call the credit card company and get an instant refund without almost like any explanation or work on their part?
Correct. And if you think about it, it sounds like the most horrible thing and dishonest consumers, but the reality is there has been a lot of identity theft. There are so many virtual charges that are done online. There's people that don't read terms and conditions. They buy things from apps. With COVID specifically, we have brand new demographics that aren't used to interacting with a virtual, internet. And to your point, it could be innocent. You just didn't recognize it. But today, you can literally go to your phone app with most banks and click a button. You don't even have to contact your bank, and you'll see pretty much an instant refund. So whatever you dispute, your balance on your credit card statement is going to reflect, that amount less the dispute. So you can kind of get the idea how this can turn into a pretty bad habit.
Sure. And that's what I wanted to ask you about. It does sound like a bad habit and one that could be abused. Is there a limit for, to protect then the business owners that you can't have these people going out there collecting refunds left and right? I imagine there's got to be some sort of measure in place where the credit card company could say, hey, you disputed 2 charges already this month. Now we're not going to immediately refund you anymore over a certain limit or something like that.
Well, we should have another podcast on that topic. But no, unfortunately, there's only limits. There's only limits with regard to how many chargebacks the business owner can receive.
Jeez.
Yeah, which is why we have a business. Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so just to take a step back, so what line of work or what type of product, just to give your own personal experience, what e-commerce business did you have before you got into the current company?
So what I did, I had set up like a marketplace, and I had joint ventures with various companies, mostly luxury goods. And so,
Okay.
unfortunately, they were targeted for chargebacks. But because I shipped things international, I didn't know that there were products that were getting held up in customs. I had, it was just a plethora of different issues. And then
Hmm.
I also identified that there were a large number of consumers that when I interviewed them, they claimed they never contacted their bank and they never filed a chargeback. And then I discovered, sometimes it's not the consumer, sometimes it's their bank. And because I never responded to any chargeback, I didn't even know what it was. It was just like I would get letters and just file them away and ignore them.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that I needed to respond. So because I wasn't responding, then my reputation with some of these credit card companies is that they thought that I was doing something fraudulent. And so they were
Hmm.
proactively filing chargebacks on behalf of their consumers in
Wow.
order to protect consumers from fraud, because not responding to anything was kind of, acknowledging that yes, this is fraud. So it turns into a vicious cycle.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people aren't, especially startups and things, not totally familiar with how that process works.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
one of the,
who does that? You start a business, and you make sure that you know how to charge, how to refund, how to sell your product, and you focus on that. Not very many people are focused on what could happen if and looking behind their shoulders at, transactions, a 0.5% of transactions from 6 months ago.
exactly, yeah, that's it's a lot to keep track of. And so one of the things, and I want to get into kind of your company and what you're doing now in crypto and all this stuff, but just to piggyback or to just dive a little deeper, I should say, on these chargebacks, you mentioned that when somebody contacts their bank or credit card company, they say, I didn't get this, or I was not content with this, or whatever the case may be. And then instantly you have a debit on your side because they had to refund that customer.
Correct.
How does that work? Like, do all the credit card companies have just kind of carte blanche access to your business checking? And then whatever's in there, they can essentially dip their hands in there and take back their own refund?
They do. And, I found out the hard way. Not only can they take back the amount of the refund, but if you get too many chargebacks, or if your business is growing too fast, then that your merchant processing company, or the company that is debiting you, also can take more funds. And they have rights to, create a reserve account to protect the bank in case you are committing fraud, and you have, because they don't want to get stuck with a scenario where they have to protect consumers and there's no funds available from the business owner.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, listening to some of this, how the industry works, it does sound like there's good measures in there to protect the consumer. And then the credit card company is being proactive, like you said, taking some extra reserve money to make that all work. But obviously, this can end up really hurting the business owner if things get out of hand, like you said. So, how do you rectify this? I guess what's maybe the cliff notes of what your company's doing now to solve that for business owners?
Yeah, so we codified 106 different rules that our technology uses to help, really identify chargeback tendencies. And you can use our software. We have a technology platform, so we offer software, we have APIs, and then we automate the responses to chargebacks so that it helps solve some of the reputational damage that most businesses are unaware. It's out of sight, out of mind until it becomes a major problem. So the goal is to make sure that you're utilizing every type of prevention mechanism in place, and understanding what consumers see. You brought up a great point. The majority of chargebacks are filed innocently by consumers because they just simply don't recognize the charge. And so we help identify exactly what's showing on that charge, and make sure that the business owner is aware. Hey, is this going to create more chargebacks? Because it doesn't have what you're showing consumers that buy your product has nothing to do with what they purchased. And there's ways to change that and make sure that it's more transparent. And when you get into different countries and different currencies and policies, I mean, there's a lot of technology that goes into play to make sure that you have the right risk management protocols in place.
Certainly. Yeah. And so now you guys, your company, Chargebacks 911, what I mentioned earlier, so you're tracking over 2.4 billion transactions a year on clients that are all over the country. Do you have a tech background? Like, how did you set up this technology that's able and capable to actually do that and to do that accurately?
So I'm self-taught. I don't have a traditional tech background, and I don't have a background in the payments industry either.
Okay.
But I've been an entrepreneur probably, from the beginning of time, it seems. So I love technology. I love solving problems. I probably am one of those people. I was born with that gene where I just really like to dig into things and figure out how to solve a problem. And solving this problem, I was passionate about it because, of course, it affected my own business. I wasn't even aware that other businesses were as naive as I was to not know how to handle chargebacks until we constructed this technology and I wrote the first program. And then it started getting results, and we responded. And I read probably 2,000 pages of policies and regulations with Visa, MasterCard, etc., so I could learn to speak that language. And I'm thinking, any e-commerce business clearly already has this down packed. It's only me that was the idiot that got into this without knowing what you do. And so what happened is the banks that I did business with started calling me and saying, hey, would you talk to some business owners that are having the same problem that you are? And some of these were pretty massive businesses. And so I created Chargebacks 911 initially as a blog. I was just going to sell consulting. And of course, with a name like Chargebacks 911, definitely never saw myself providing any service in a corporate environment. It was more kind of a slap to the industry, because what I wanted as a merchant is I just wanted to dial 911 for emergency help. And I did not want to touch a chargeback. As a business owner, you care about your customers. You don't care about, the small handful that are upset for one reason or another. And, it's crazy. After just a few weeks, I was contacted by the New York Times, then the Wall Street Journal. And I thought, you know what? Actually, I'm going to build a technology platform that other merchants can use. That was 12 years ago. And then we expanded to serve financial institutions as well.
That's pretty cool. And now this can obviously, we said there's always room for fraud in any enterprise. And especially now with the way that technology works, it's only exaggerated exponentially. So what are you seeing in respect to cybercrime? And I know a lot of the things that people out there are afraid of, whether it be, just from having their identity stolen and watching their checking account disappear, to, all the other things that we can get into that are perhaps more noteworthy and that you see in headlines in the news. What's some of your experience so far with, cybercrime?
So great question. I think, what we have sort of the chicken and the egg scenario going on. So we
Mhm.
have, a lot of, like a revolution with technology, right? Merchants are definitely, and business owners are leading the forge in creating new technology, removing friction from the experience, and that has created a lot of momentum. But we also have this complete shift in consumer behavior. And that makes things really challenging. Is it technology that's creating loopholes to exploit, or is it consumer behavior? And are we training consumers to, adopt new standards that are unreasonable? And specifically, like, many of us have so many different accounts. We feel secure because we see technology has advanced to such a point that we may still use the same password on every single device we have, because who cares? My bank is going to take care of me. They're secure. I trust them. And actually, I don't care about security anymore. I just care about, you know, having one less click, getting my merchandise tomorrow. Actually, in the next hour would be good. These are the
Yeah.
things that, social media. I mean, so that it really is a catalyst. So I think, when we take a look at where is there, more development in scams, it's really exploiting some of these behaviors and loopholes. So crypto scams, I mean, that's off the charts, right? Digital
Yeah.
currencies, and that's piggybacking on, this safe mentality that consumers have almost brainwashed themselves into thinking, because the industry has done a great job making people feel safe when they enter their card online. You rarely, I think all of us have received those SMS messages that say, "Hey, did you recognize this charge?" And our
Mhm.
banks are catching fraud before we do. So we have this false sense of security. So why wouldn't we, go do an investment in a digital currency? It's a currency. It's, we have this false sense of security that unfortunately, we're taking things for granted that actually don't exist. Um, uh, Emails,
Yeah.
like, phishing scams, etc. I think those are new exploitable opportunities that are starting to grow, mainly because since COVID, we have virtually every demographic now is engaging digitally. So, prior to COVID, there were still specific demographics where they didn't buy everything online, they didn't download apps, they didn't do their banking through apps. And today,
Mhm.
the whole world has become digital, it's become virtual, and this is just a way of life.
So what just to interrupt right there, if you don't mind, we talked a little bit about phishing and stuff. You have these business email compromise, or the BEC. I know that's considered like the costliest scheme out there that people are perpetrating. Then you have ransomware. You have these different ones you hear of. There's, the social engineering scams. What do people maybe really need to hone in on? Because like you said, they're getting a false sense of security of, well, my banks or my institutions that I work with are watching my back. They're sending me these notifications before anything even happens. Yet we see that just by the numbers, the amount of fraud that's successful and actually, being perpetrated is just expanding every single year. So it's like we feel like we're doing better, but obviously, maybe we're not, just by the fact of the matter, the results that we see.
Yeah. I think that what we see in terms of, how fraud is being reimagined, right? There's a lot of engineering that is going on in the fraud space. And it's happening with consumers, it's happening with criminals as well. And I think part of that it really has to do with the way that data has changed and the value of data. It used to be that, criminals would go after getting credit card numbers. Credit card numbers, like, who cares about credit card numbers anymore? Really, the thing that is, most threatening to a consumer and most valuable to a criminal is going to be their personal information, behaviors. And we see this with some of the SIM hacking, the SIM swap scams that have happened with crypto, and people getting access. What you want to do is you want to know, how can I pretend like I'm this customer, and all the social engineering that goes on, tricking banks to give information so that you can use that information, and it's a long-term strategy. It's more of strategic fraud, right? It's not, let me get a card and then and make a charge and get as much money as I can. The card gets reported as lost or stolen, and and that's it. It's really, a much more strategic evolution. So I think for consumers, we need to be a lot more cautious about, I always preach this about passwords, use password control, use different passwords, but also shy away from things that you don't have a protection on. Like, it's great to have a crypto account, fine, and diversify, but utilizing those funds to purchase something that could go wrong, you won't have any fallback. And then, if you have, all of us have our entire lives sitting on our phone and on our computer. So, what kind of protection do you have on your phone? And there's still many phone carriers that don't require, dual authentication. They don't require PINs. As a consumer, you can opt in to create additional PINs, to create additional security, to have additional phone numbers, to make sure that your phone number can't get ported to someone else's number. These are things that, it seems like tedious, almost conspiracy theory, like, why would you go through all of this? It's safe. That's well worthwhile, I think, in today's environment.
Yeah, no, very good advice there. But I guess that one of the questions I have is, you mentioned the false sense of security that we're getting from the text notifications, some of those things where there's like, okay, there's some protocol here where people are looking out for us. I think there's a combination of that, then also with the other end of the spectrum of people out there just saying, my information's already out there. And I know that. I know Target, can get hacked, or my credit card company can get hacked. And then you have, 100,000, credit card files out there that are God knows where, and they're getting bought and sold on the black market. And you hear so many of these stories. I mean, I've had probably 3 or 4 credit cards where, Bank of America comes back and says, there could have been something compromised somewhere along the chain, so we're just going to send you a new credit card to be safe. And then you have to go set up all your auto, debits and all those things that you do, all your auto charges. So I think like that's the other side, is people almost accept the fact that they've lost a lot of their privacy. And I mean, maybe what can you speak to that? Because I think a lot of people kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, I'll try and do the simple things like change my password, but there's a good chance somebody out there who knows where has my name, has my social, has an old phone number. They know my password to LinkedIn or to Facebook. And it's like all that data kind of exists somewhere.
You're absolutely right. And I think a lot of people sit back and think, you know what, it's there. But we're still in control of that. So for example, I was reading a case study actually out of the UK recently, and it was talking about, just security protocols for cell phone carriers. And the amount of people that have, their number, it's not even a connected, or it's a disconnected number. So you set up your cell phone maybe 10 years ago, and you don't ever change your cell phone, but you never actually update that the recovery phone number is a different phone number. That recovery phone number may not even exist. Maybe it goes to your ex. Maybe it goes, it's just little things like that where and I think it's important to make things current, not just passwords, but also, set up your right addresses, make sure that things are current. Also, the simplest thing, check your bank balances and your credit card balances utilizing apps like Mint. Of these types of apps, Intuit has this great program, but essentially what you do is you can put in all of your credit cards. And I say this because in the US, the average consumer has 3.8 cards. So let's say each of us have 4 cards in our wallet, and we're probably using them for different things. We have recurring subscriptions, we have this, we have that. Well, here's what happens with fraudsters. They get your buying pattern. And so maybe, you use Amazon, and 40% of our transactions today in the US are from Amazon. All of us are using Amazon. Well, now you have these 4 cards, and instead of using all 4 cards randomly to buy things from Amazon, just use one and then make sure that you look at it, because chances are at the end of the month, maybe you would notice, and this is what a fraudster would do, there could be a charge that says Amazon X. Well, that is fraud, and it could just be for $5.80. It could be for $100. You're looking at it, you're scanning it, and you're just saying, yeah, I buy a lot of things from Amazon. I can't remember what I bought, but it looks legit. Now, if you use all of your cards, well, you don't even know. And I'll tell you, like for our business and for businesses specifically, all of us probably do business with Google AdWords. And I cannot even tell you how many other businesses I've talked to that we've been scammed on our own business cards, because we have multiple cards that are used for Google AdWords. Well, then, you look at what your normal budget would be. It fluctuates up, it fluctuates down. And I'm assuming, hey, this is our budget for marketing. Clearly, if it says Google AdWords, it must be legit. Well, guess what? No, actually, our card number was stolen. It's being used by a criminal who's also using it for Google AdWords. and I mean, but it's like, it's that smart, right?
Yeah.
So like it isn't about let me steal a card and get caught. It's let me steal this information and never get caught. So this person, they shop at Target, they buy this, they buy that. You know what? I'm just going to emulate their same behavior, because most consumers are a bit lazy. We have auto payment. We don't check our statement. Nobody writes checks anymore. And you look at things maybe every few months. You're not
And so
going to catch it.
Yep. So they're essentially mimicking the person that they victimized, so that then those
100%.
credit card companies don't raise any red flags. They don't really notice it quite yet.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what's happening.
It's scary. Yeah, that's wild. And now if you're on the unfortunate side of that, where you are the victim, and let's say you're being vigilant, you check your bank balances, your portfolio every day, and then all of a sudden, because I have seen this, you get that $30,000, withdrawal from your checking account. This is a true story. Actually, I saw a $30,000 withdrawal for international phone fees. And it was just absolutely outrageous. And it's like, how did that carrier that they're not even using not flag, what was over $30,000 of charges for international calling or whatever that was? So when you see that, I know you can then report it, but then apparently from what I've heard, the process to go through to actually then recoup that $30,000 of, stolen money can be extremely lengthy and not even guaranteed. And so the follow-up, I know that's kind of a lengthy question, but where would identity theft protection come in? Where you see a lot of these, companies out there say that they'll cover, maybe up to $1 million of fraud. So is that the only kind of buffer to say, okay, I can immediately get reimbursed, kind of like going back to the chargeback conversation?
Yeah,
Or does that victim have to just kind of wait it out and hope that they recoup all that money?
yeah, I mean, identity theft protection is kind of like your insurance policy, right? So that's definitely wise, and you can fall back on that. But I also encourage, any consumer to make sure that, you understand your rights and read about it. And, just do your own research. So not every bank has the same policies. They can choose to do things in a different way, but they are regulated very much the same. And so if you, rather than just call, and if you're given, the go around, and specifically if you haven't authorized something, and it literally, if it's an amount like 30 grand and it's coming out of your account, and this is something that is not characteristic, that you should be able to to definitely pursue some quick relief on that. Yes, you're going to have to fill out a bunch of forms and jump through hoops and probably go file a police report, but you shouldn't be in a position where, you're left holding things. Where it gets complicated and where it is much more challenging and it is going to take a lengthy process is if you participated in the authorization at all. So that's where it gets tricky. If you participate in an authorization and then you say, well, but I was scammed, and you didn't use your credit card and you didn't use your debit card, because Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, all of these companies, because you're a member and you have a card, you have a lot of rights to charge back, to push back, and you're going to get immediate refunds. And I would never recommend buying anything online if you do not use a card, because the protections that you have as a consumer, are off the charts. But if you have, let's say you have a Zelle payment, or it's P2P, or peer-to-peer, if it's some type of wire authorization, etc., crypto is another example. But if you are found to be involved in anything during that authorization, that's going to be a more sticky situation. So for those things, just recognize you do not have same protection. So do your research.
And I think that's where a lot of people get scared is, they could say that, well, did you have any authorization, throughout this process? And you say, well, no, but in the technical sense you did, because if somebody was able to gain access to your email or your phone or whatever it may have been, it wasn't you personally, but your identity gave access or authorization for that charge. And I think that kind of comes back to like how many layers, the criminal can essentially penetrate to be acting on your behalf. And I imagine that's where it can just get so difficult where, the bank or the company can say, look, you authorized X, Y, and Z on 3 different occasions. And then the victim is saying, I didn't do any of that. Like somebody had access to these various accounts to go ahead and carry that out.
And it's definitely a very sticky situation. There's lots of fraud that gets reported between spouses, between households, where you would not believe it. Somebody makes a transfer, using their mother's cell phone, and then the mother says, hey, well, that wasn't authorized. Well, was it really not authorized? Because you never reported that your phone was taken. Your phone was used for the transaction. And now we're discovering that it was your son that did this. So it is, it's not authorized, but if you have a personal device, then just like you said, you're responsible for maintaining security on that personal device. And it does take it takes a lot more effort to prove that a SIM card was taken, or that's tricky.
Yeah. And now just to kind of pivot a little bit, I know one of the commonalities you're seeing in a lot of this cybercrime is crypto. And when you hear about, the big ransomware attack or whatever it may have been, this anonymous criminal out there is often asking that the ransom or whatever it is be made paid in the form of crypto or Bitcoin. What's your take on that? Because it is still like the governments are starting to think about regulating this, but it's still somewhat of like the wild, wild west. How is that affecting business, and what are you seeing maybe in chargebacks, if it's relevant at all to that? What is crypto doing to that space right now?
I think the scare with some of the fraud that's happened in crypto is probably pushing consumers to make sure that they use other payment methods when they're purchasing things online. And there's been a lot that has been publicized about the fact that it really is the wild, wild west. That said, for some of these large purchases, there's a lot of advantages to pay in crypto and receive in crypto, depending on who you are and what the transaction is. But it's a volatile currency. It's very, very difficult to regulate because of that the volatility. I personally think, if you if you have a body that is going to regulate something that is used for payments, then this body that creates the regulations and the policies should actually, this should be probably within the payments industry. And the challenge, yes, you need the government support for some of the regulation, because we do need protections that are built in place. That absolutely is vital to create some sustainability here and also protect consumers, and frankly, just protect the currency and the whole business model. But we need to make sure that the laws that are being created and the insight and the innovation around this is drafted. We don't want it overregulated, and we need to make sure that we utilize domain expertise. And so, I'm a fan of government, assisting, but I do think that this is a payments function, and where it comes into payments, then there should be, some collaborative efforts in making sure that we really keep that as a payments function within the ecosystem. Because I think there's also additional risk if we take that and separate it, and now, there's CDBC. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about digital currencies today, and there could be conflicts of interest. I just think it's a lot more complex subject than people realize at first glance.
It definitely is. And I wanted to ask you your own opinion. Are you a proponent of crypto? Like, do you think it's here to stay?
I think crypto is here to stay. I don't think it's going to go away. I think that there's a lot that needs that it's in the process of evolving constantly. And I don't think that we will see stability and a sustainable currency until the right protection mechanisms are in place. And I also think that there's plenty of attention on those problems. But it will take more of a collaborative effort. This isn't something that I think you can carve out on the side and say, let's just create a mechanism for this. Other countries, I think, are ahead of us in terms of, looking at a better and a more layered approach that is collaborative with some data sharing. And I mean, look, fraud across the board. One of the issues with fraud, regardless if it's crypto or not, right? There's a lack of transparency, and that needs to be solved for the entire economy. It doesn't make any sense that today a bank is supposed, we have all of this intelligence and technology, but every bank effectively operates in their own silo. And when it comes to fraud, there should be much more collaboration. There should be shared fraud data, and the more data that we have, and the data sets rather, are also continuing to increase. So who cares about IP addresses any longer? You have device ID, you have biometrics. There's a lot of sophistication that I think really need to be leveraged so that we create more of a blockchain environment in terms of fraud management.
Yeah, no, I agree. There definitely needs to be some regulation if it's going to be legitimized. And it just seems like, at least if you follow kind of anecdotally what's going on with cryptocurrency, the biggest headlines, the biggest transfers of wealth through crypto have all been through cybercrime.
Right.
I haven't seen any marquee purchase or sale that's occurred, all through crypto. Maybe a little bit here or there, you might hear of a pro athlete taking a salary or a bonus in the form of crypto or something. But where I think it's, most notable and most infamous is when you hear, something, one of these ransomware attacks, and they want, $50 million in the form of Bitcoin.
Right.
And so that's a little scary, obviously, especially when you're seeing younger generations and millennials and those following are really trying to embrace it. And they like some of the deregulation away from just one standard currency. So it definitely has support. And
but I think if you take a look at, any emerging market, any emerging idea, right? Unfortunately, I think criminals always get there first. Um,
True.
and they kind of inspire the innovation and the architecture that's required, because you suffer the consequences. It's sort of like, we all have to fail our way to success, regardless of what avenue we're exploring. And with crypto, I think it's like, here's this idea, and then we're going to experience all the issues with this first, so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we know what needs to be done to now be able to create an environment where this idea can become maybe what it was designed to be in the first place.
Yeah. And I just want to ask to kind of tie it all together. So obviously you started this company trying to solve the epidemic, if you will, of chargebacks for e-commerce companies. Is that only respective to credit cards? Like if crypto does grow and people want to go transact on the internet and buy something through their Bitcoin account, is there any recourse like there would be where if all of a sudden I didn't get the product I was supposed to, boom, I could call Visa up and immediately get my refund? Is that only through credit cards? Do you see that expanding elsewhere to other forms of payment?
Yeah, so we support the majority of alternative payment methods. We also support digital currencies, such as, if you're an airline and you have, you know, um, loyalty points, believe it or not, like that's a digital currency. It has a cash value in the market, and there's fraud that goes on between, customers that transfer and steal points. So, anything that has a value that can get abused. Really what we do, another way of thinking about it, is post-sale fraud. So everybody is familiar with the pre-sale fraud. That's a fraud filter. You want to prevent the fraud. But then once the sale happens, now you have, this post-sale environment, and all sorts of fraud can still occur after that fact. When it comes to crypto, then, yes, I think that things will continue to evolve, and absolutely, we have different avenues that we're engaged in currently to support some of the evolution in that space. But today there are avenues that can be used if you have crypto and you want to, purchase something in crypto and be protected by your Visa card or your MasterCard, because many of the card brands today have now partnered with, some of the crypto platforms. So you can pay with your Visa card, but it's operating more like a wallet for your crypto. And to me, if I was buying something and I wanted to pay for in crypto, I would use that to fund a wallet and then actually pay with my Visa card, because you do want to make sure that you have those protections in place. Now, the problem is you don't have any protection on the fluctuating and the volatile currency rate. So whatever you pay today, that's all that you're going to get. So
Exactly. Yep.
there's some nuances there for sure.
Yep.
But at least, you can use something that has a stable protection mechanism, as a front end layer that otherwise you wouldn't have anything at all.
Got it. Yeah, and I think that last piece you mentioned is something definitely to keep in mind, is the volatility of the value of that underlying currency is something that's a whole nother story. It's so unique because you think the US dollar is what it is. You could benchmark it to other currencies or see how it holds value just versus inflation. But then you talk about cryptocurrency and you say, all right, I got $100 of Bitcoin, at the beginning of 2021. Well, now that's essentially that same level of Bitcoin is worth $50 at the end of the year. That can add a lot of complexity to the time lag in these transactions.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely makes things a lot more complicated.
Sure. And maybe this we could save for another episode, because so many of these topics, and I hope we're doing, justice to, I think, kind of how important this conversation is, but I know it can get very deep and very complex. I wanted to ask you about AI. Obviously, ChatGPT has kind of taken the world by storm a little bit in the first couple months so far this year, even though I don't think a lot of people totally understand what it does other than being kind of like another Siri. Anything that you could add on AI, maybe as a closing note in the space that you deal with of chargebacks and now the exposure to cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so again, it all comes down to data, right? In AI, we use AI, we have machine learning. We're actually doing some things with Chat GPT ourselves as well. Um, Really, I'm actually so excited about, I've always said, like, what we do in chargebacks is kind of like blockchain. And it is about, it's always, the goal is to create transparency and then make decisions that are data driven. And when it comes to, chargebacks, it's such a manual, arduous process that's very, very old. It was designed in the 70s, and these mechanics really haven't changed that much. So I'm like extremely excited about all of the new tech in the space, and the plugins that are available. I think that things are only going to get better, and as the world, utilizes more and more adaptive technology, I think that's also better. We can't operate with these static data sets when things are evolving so rapidly. We really need dynamic technology that can adjust. If and we need to be able to take in every piece of data. Something that I've learned in my industry in chargebacks is that every single piece of data has value. If you don't think it has value, you just don't have enough context. You don't have enough relationships, but then you'll discover patterns that it has, relationships that it has, and it tells a story. And utilizing, AI learning, or AI along with machine learning, I think you're still going to need some human input, of course, but to think, we're moving in a direction where we can create data-driven decisions and really optimize that intelligence. That's super exciting.
It is. It really is. And it's crazy to think this story of, chargebacks. It gives you a whole story arc of like where money begins, how it goes to a product, to the business, and then back, and you kind of follow this whole circle of, what the consumer expected and then what the business provided and the exchange of wealth therein. And yeah, it leads to just obviously a very broad conversation here. So any closing thoughts that you have, Monica, that would be worthwhile for, our listeners here?
Man, what closing thoughts would I have? I would say stay tuned and listen to Brian. No, this has been an intelligent conversation. I love having conversations that, there's interest and we can explore, different avenues. I think there needs to be more discussion about a lot of these topics, to flesh out. Just create more awareness, because things that people don't hear about, they don't get interested in, and people need to recognize taking an interest in these things. This is affecting us. It's affecting the whole world, and it affects how we do business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's spot on. And that's even what I've tried to talk about in my book. And even when I'm doing seminars and things is that money tells the whole story. And when you follow the dollars, it kind of clarifies things. And I think back in the day, a lot of people used to say, well, I want to go buy this widget from this company. I go to the cash register, I hand them a $10 bill, they hand me the product, and then we're done. That same exchange is happening, but now it's all kind of out there in
Right.
this e-commerce world. And I think you just have to kind of go with the times, like you're saying, that's the age we live in. It's the same transaction. It's just there's all these extra layers of complexity. And what blows my mind, not to go on a tangent, is everything just seems to be dictated by speed. Like how fast can we, open and close this transaction, all across the world. It's like at lightning pace, but then to rectify some of these situations, it could seem like it takes forever. And I think
100%.
that's where there's just got to be ways. And I'm like you're saying, I'm sure we can improve upon these lines of communication so that, if that person's disputing, the charge, they can contact Visa or whoever, Discover, and then they can contact you. And it's like, why can't we almost have like a group email of somebody said, I thought I bought this, they're immediately on the same chain. Right. Yeah. With the bank and with the,
right. Yeah. Click a button. No,
yeah.
I always say, one of the biggest challenges, I think, industry wide, is that we always think that we want to build a better version of the world. And really, that is not what we need. We don't need a better version of the old world. The rest of the world is new. It's a new world. It actually has nothing like the old world. It's brand new. So stop thinking of the legacy mentality that, I just want the same 10 steps, but I want it faster. No, those 10 steps are now 2. And actually, they're not even within those 10. It's totally different. And we have to, that's real innovation. It's not just making things faster. It's not just, speeding up the current process. It's actually analyzing the existing scenario, which is nothing like it was before, and then, creating solutions that fit that purpose.
I couldn't have said it better. And I think that's kind of a good closing point there. I really appreciate you coming on the show here, Monica. This is very interesting. I think we could have an hour conversation on each little story that we shared. But I think if for nothing else, if all the listeners out there just take away kind of the gravity of what technology is doing, and that we just have to at least all have kind of a base knowledge. My world's personal finance. I feel like for a second, like I'm stepping out of my lane, having this conversation, only to come back and realize everything we're talking about is the transfer of money. And 100%. So we've all got to be, at least a little bit up to speed on what's transpiring right now.
Right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. And great discussion.
Yep. Likewise. We'll be in touch. And everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Caderna podcast. I'm your host, Brian Caderna. Today, we listened with Monica Eaton, the founder of Chargebacks 911. You can learn more about her in the show notes, and we will see you next time. This podcast is intended for the general public and for informational purposes only. The show does not provide any recommendations or investment advice regarding any specific account type, service, strategy, or product, or to otherwise act in any fiduciary or other capacity. Please contact a financial professional for guidance and information that is specific to your situation. Brian Caderna does not provide tax or legal advice. Please contact your accountant or legal advisor to discuss your situation. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Caderna Financial Team, and opinions stated are their own. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. References to specific securities, asset classes, and financial markets are for illustrative purposes only and do not constitute a solicitation, offer, or recommendation to purchase or sell a security. Brian Caderna is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS. OSJ 300 Broadacres Drive, Suite 175, Bloomfield, New Jersey, 07003. Phone number 973-244-4420. Securities products and advisory services offered through PAS, member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Caderna Financial Team is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. California Insurance License Number 0K04194.